Hi, everyone. Welcome back to today's episode of the Healthy Shift Worker podcast, where we're going to be talking about a topic around circadian health, which is something that I've been passionate and interested in about for nearly 10 years now. And I'm really excited to have a special guest on the show today, Dr. Max Gulhane, who is a practicing health optimizing physician and training general practitioner based in Albury, New South Wales, here in Australia. He has a passion for helping patients achieve optimal health with an emphasis on circadian rhythms and ancestral diets. He also hosts his own podcast, the Regenerative Health Podcast, where he interviews doctors, health practitioners, and regenerative farmers and promotes decentralized solutions to the new normal of chronic disease. So, welcome, Max. So great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Audra.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I guess before we launch straight into the nitty-gritty questions that I've got for you, I'd love to sort of hear a little bit about your background getting into medicine. Like, is it something that you were always wanting to do?
Yeah, my family had a little bit of a medical background, and I was unsure whether that was a path for me, and kind of thinking independently and what, just as a general character trait of mine. So I did a science degree, and in that time period, did some basic science research, some lab research. When traveling, did a university exchange, and then decided that I would give medicine a go. So and I did my undergraduate studies in Queensland, and then moved down to Melbourne, the University of Melbourne, to study medicine. And that was the kind of the prelude or the background to what I would later, or what was one of the reasons why I was able to kind of use that information and knowledge in a kind of different way. But the way that medicine and science is set up, the educational structure is very much pushing doctors towards a treatment based model. It's not emphasizing preventative health. And that was something that I had to understand myself, having gone through my own health journey. But the way that it's geared up and the way that it's really set up is reactionary. And for your listeners and for people doing shift work, and we're not really told that can have an impact on our health, but it becomes very, very relevant when we're thinking about this model of health and disease, and thinking about preventative healthcare, and trying to catch people before they fall sick, rather than waiting till someone gets so unwell that they need medications and surgeries. So that is I started in this mainstream model, but I'm since kind of branched out into these more holistic areas in an attempt to, again, catch people before they fall off the metaphorical waterfall.
Brilliant. Yeah, that I guess is what really drew me to I don't even remember exactly how I stumbled across you, but when I started listening to your podcast, I could appreciate that you really do have this root cause approach towards your patient care, as you said, that preventative approach versus reactive.
Yeah, it's. I think at the core of it is curiosity, because, and everyone who does a job well and is curious, I think, and to understand what we're doing and understand our job best, you have to keep asking questions. And that's the same in engineering. It's the same in whatever field that people work in. So I think for me, just asking the next question takes you even further back to, why is this patient who's sitting in front of me with type 2 diabetes, how did they get that disease? And I think for a lot of people in the mainstream, or many doctors, that curiosity has a bound, and that there's a limit to the number of questions that people are asking. And I'm not criticizing them for that. I think that, not completely, but I do think we as doctors are obliged to understand as much of the body as what's going on, so we can most serve our patients the best. But for me, it was a process of just asking more and more questions. So why is someone sick? I'll share my story, which was I developed acne in my late teenagehood, early 20s, and people are done with acne by the age of 14, 15, 16, but it was something that happened to me later in life, and it turned out that what was causing the acne, well, there were several causes, but the most proximate cause was simply eating a high grain based diet. So the types of foods that we get told are, for active young people or active anyone, eat your grains, eat your up and goes, your wheat bixes, your Powerades. I wasn't drinking liters of Coca-Cola or going to McDonald's every day. But those high carb foods that we're told are a good performance aid for people who are active, those were sufficient to cause this acne problem in me. And going through medical school and university and not being really served with a framework for understanding that disease mechanism was kind of what sent me down this pathway. So I think that anyone who has had to work out a problem themselves, and I think your listeners are doing that by listening to your podcast, they're trying to work out how to be healthy and fitting that around their professional career. Anyone who's had to solve their own problem and not had that solution provided to them within the framework of or a structure or a narrative or an organization that was perhaps supposed to provide an answer. Anyone who's had to find their own answers, I think, inherently starts maybe mistrusts, or for me, asks more questions. So if you find one rotten apple in the fruit bowl, or you find some mold on a tomato, you're gonna look at all the other ones. So I think that process is very important because it again allows us to ask questions. So that all that was to, I guess, deliver me up to this position now where I've thought about circadian rhythms, because after addressing diet and a lot of people, especially in the health and nutrition, health optimization space, kind of end their questioning on diet, and diet is absolutely a key part of the puzzle. But the further you look, the more you understand that circadian rhythms and light has a massive effect on health. And for those who are really interested, it goes all the way back to essentially the beginning of kind of life on Earth, or not too long after, in terms of development. But these tiny little bacteria had to find a way of getting used to or getting ready for an environment change, and that massive environment change was the presence and absence of light. And during the daytime, when there was sun out, their ability to metabolize nutrients and to essentially operate, it was drastically different compared to the nighttime. So just fast forward 2.7 billion years, and even though we're now a very smart talking monkey, a primate, we still, and every other organism on the planet, that we still have this inherent need to respect the change of day in terms of the presence and absence of light. So that's really important, because everyone listening to this podcast is doing some form of work that inherently disrespects that fundamental need. And although we'd like to think that what we're doing can be kind of facilitated by in our work environment, but the reality is, and this is coming from personal experience, having worked in shift work in emergency departments around Australia, is that our circadian biology wants us to be asleep during the nighttime. So what we're doing, and when we're working shift work, and what we can do as much as possible, is to put in place measures that allow us to mitigate as much as possible this unnatural sleep-wake cycle. So it's a process of adaptation, mitigation, and just doing as much as we can to mitigate and minimize the effect on health of shift work.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely love that. And I'm very much on the same path when you're referring to, diet is great. Obviously, that's why I ended up studying it. But I felt that there was also a missing link with people's well-being, and the sleep one was a huge one. And so it's about putting the cart before the horse and shifting things around again. And now it's like, for me, it's that whole circadian health should be at the top of the of the pyramid. So I guess I'm really looking forward to asking you about how you got on during night shift as well. But just to take a step back a little bit, could you just to describe to our listeners, like, what exactly is circadian health and circadian rhythms for those of them, our listeners that may not have even heard of that term before?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. So circadian is a Latin word. Essentially, it means around a day. Circa means around, and dia is a day. So the circadian rhythm refers to a clock mechanism, a timing mechanism that we all have inside our body. And this clock timing mechanism sits at a very important part of the brain, just not too far behind the eyes. And it is like a master clock that coordinates all the body's processes with the time of day that exists in our environment. So what that essentially means is that it is almost, it runs on a 24-hour clock, but it's not quite 24 hours. So it constantly needs informing of these signals about the time of day. And just like you might have some people in your audience that know about engines, if you put the fuel in and the air intake and you ignite it in the wrong sequence, the engine's not going to work properly. You need the perfect timing of the injection of fuel and the spark to make sure that piston is ignited. So the same basic idea is occurring with your body. You need to have the correct timing and hormone signals so that in the morning you feel alert, you go to the toilet, evacuate your bowels, you start to become active. In the middle of the day is peak activity, finding food, eating food. Later in the afternoon, winding down, relaxation, social contact, and then throughout the night, rest, repair, and your whole body undergoes a whole bunch of important garbage cleaning mechanisms to make sure you don't get things like cancer, to make sure that damage to your muscles repair if you've gone out and killed a lion, all these important things that need to happen during the nighttime. So the circadian rhythm is your body's way of making sure that what our activity and the processes that it needs to do is perfectly aligned with the appropriate light and the appropriate essentially time of day or night. So that means that we need to, as much as possible, for optimal circadian health, collect as much information about the time of day. And the position of that clock in just behind the brain informs us that, or is evidence that the light is the most important influence of that circadian timing. So the light signals that we get through our eyes inform that clock. That's the most important so-called Zeitgeber, or things that informs the clock of the time of day. The way that it does that is through a bunch of cells that don't actually form an image. They actually simply just respond to the presence or the absence of blue light. So, if you imagine that when the most of your eye function is a camera, and it will tell you, if there's a sofa in front of me, if there's, I can see the ocean. That is what most of the cells in the eye are doing. But these separate cells are simply like a detector. It's like a detector that you have in your house to detect burglar alarms. It's an on and off type function. So those special cells, they will turn on and off if there's blue light there or not. And the relevance for that is that ancestrally and traditionally, the only time that those cells would be firing would be during the day, because that's the only time there was blue wavelength light around. But since the invention of the electricity grid and the modernization of civilization and society, and we've found a way of creating our own blue light that is not and completely disconnected from the sun.
Yeah.
And so much so that we've gotten rid of incandescent and halogen bulbs, which emitted less blue light relative to the other wavelengths. And simply, we're all sitting under this LED and compact fluorescent lamps, which have a massive spike in blue light. So remember that your body is designed or was evolved to respond to blue light by telling you to be alert, by telling you it's time to wake up, it's time to go find prey, go do everything that we need to do. But the problem here, and this is the fundamental problem that is affecting people who do shift work who aren't taking steps to protect themselves, is that you're signaling midday, summer midday, all the time, and we're signaling that summer midday even when our body's expecting to be asleep. And with the type of blue light that we're getting is so purified and so refined that it's inherently very, very damaging to our health. And that's because it's not in the presence of the other wavelengths of light that you would normally get from the sun, which include visible light like red light, orange, all the colors of the rainbow, but also non-visible light, so UV and infrared. None of that is occurring when or present in LED and compact fluorescent bulbs or from our devices. So that is essentially circadian health. It's our ability to maintain synchronization with the outside environment, predominantly through light. And one of the major ways it gets derailed is by the presence of artificial light at night, and as well as insufficient natural sunlight during the day. But the way I want people to think about it, and I think this is a really helpful way of thinking about it, is just imagine a yin and yang symbol. The where you have you've got essentially symmetrical balance of white and black, indicating light and dark. And you've got a clock timing mechanism. You've got a clock face over the yin and yang symbol. That is how to think about circadian health, because it's a perfectly balanced system. And when you send the wrong light signals, and you mess up that clock timing mechanism, or you have too much light at night and not enough light during the day, then the whole system starts going wrong. And then you can imagine that all those hormonal processes that I mentioned earlier start going haywire, and obesity, diabetes, cancer, depression, anxiety, all these things, autoimmune disease, are kind of a downstream of the circadian clock mechanism getting disrupted.
Yeah, a great explanation. Thank you. And I think, yes, that whole artificial light at night is a huge one for us shift workers. That's for sure. And I know, there is in the health and wellbeing space, there's a lot spoken about what we eat and exercise, which is all wonderful things. But we're not talking about this whole. It's like an elephant in the room, really, isn't it? Like the light toxicity, the light pollution, and that light is really a form of medicine when used correctly. Yeah.
It is, and that's exactly right. And I say, they say that you can't outrun a bad diet, and I say
Yeah.
that you can't out eat a junk light diet. And what that means is
Right.
you could be eating the highest quality food, organically raised, regeneratively grazed, wild caught oysters. You can be eating that high quality food, but if you're eating it at the wrong time, then you're not going to be optimally healthy. You're going to be doing a lot better than the person, eating the bag of Doritos and the Krispy Kreme donuts,
Yeah.
but there's still going to be, a missing piece here. So what we have to do is, as much as possible, look after both of those things. We have to try and avoid the junk food diet, but as much as possible, try and minimize or mitigate the junk light diet at the same time. I think if we can do both, then
Yeah.
that is where the optimum lies in terms of maintaining our health despite our occupational and work requirements.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think too, with shift workers, obviously there is that scenario where we can't change what we're doing, but I think there's a lot of the unconscious kind of habits, or consciously, bad habits that are making us be shift workers for long on our days off, being on the mobile phones, or or whatever. So I think, and not really understanding, as so articulated, that it really is damaging our health, because it's just not really spoken about. If anything, it's almost dismissed a little bit. It's not, that can't be real science or something like that. But yeah, I would love. And actually, I remember listening to a quote that you did on a podcast. It said, the prominent light people are exposed to today isn't sunlight, it's artificial light. So, yeah, that's got to be impacting on our health.
Totally. And the environment that which we evolved in is key. And I this is one of the key heuristics that I use to think about health, which is what is the environment which our organism, our bodies was essentially designed in? What's it designed for? It's imagine, looking at a car, and if you look at a Ferrari, it's designed for a very, very specific environment, a racetrack or a street. It's not designed for an off-road bumpy fire trail. That's where the Land Cruiser is for. So what we have to do is think about the same thing for a human being. What is the environment that we are designed for? And for, again, the billions of years, it was these changing wavelengths of natural sunlight and the characteristics of that light. So to give people, again, a bit of a deeper idea, there's when we go out in the morning, we get predominantly red, a decent amount of blue, which starts this whole wakefulness process and helps us become alert, and a bunch of infrared. So infrared is making up almost half of the whole total light that we get on Earth, but we can't even see it. That is why it perhaps is so underappreciated. But just because we can't see it doesn't mean infrared isn't having a massive effect on our cells, and it is. So first thing in the morning, we get red, we get infrared, and we get blue. And then as the day progresses, we get ultraviolet light, which is another form of non-visible light. Again, key for various processes, including heart health, including getting our blood vessels relaxed. People who have high blood pressure, one of the key reasons is because they're not getting UVA light that helps to make that very important nitric oxide chemical that relaxes all our blood vessels. So, and then in the midday, UVB, ultraviolet B, shows up, which helps us make vitamin D. But the point is that throughout the day, we've got this gradually building and then waning process of different light wavelengths that are both visible and non-visible. And that is what our body needs. That is what we have evolved to help entrain our circadian rhythm and help give us those important light signals. But if you look at an artificial light, again, the LEDs, the compact fluorescent bulbs, and the OLEDs, the LED displays, you have a massive peak in blue. It's not balanced with red. It has no infrared, and it obviously has no UV. So this is a visible only light spectrum. There's a couple of reasons why this is so important, is because, like you mentioned earlier, the light is like a medicine, and each wavelength is a different form of medicine. And we need to have them balanced with each other in order to get the correct effect on our biology. If we only have one, then that is going to be problematic. And blue light, when it comes to our metabolism, is highly detrimental. And the light actually affects the way the food is metabolized. So, and there's experiments in both in people and in animals really showing this well, is that the simply being exposed to red light reduces the blood glucose level. So we could eat the same food, but the amount of damage that would, or effect that would have on our blood glucose, and therefore our propensity to develop obesity or diabetes, is going to be affected by what light environment we're sitting under. If it's pure blue, or if it's like most people are getting, or if it's a nice balanced red and infrared that we get naturally in the morning. And the spike of your blood glucose was going to change depending on what that light environment is. So it's really up to everyone to be incredibly mindful of the light that they're actually eating under. which is a crazy thought. But as I'm sure we'll talk about, I've been on shift work, and in the afternoon shift, and instead of there's a green patch outside, I would make it my absolute priority to take my lunch, walk straight outside, take off my shoes, sit on the grass, and eat in the natural sunlight. Everyone else was in the windowless room under their fluoro bulbs, eating their lunch with carbs, and it was a very common thing for that shift to be overweight and obese. So one point to think about is, what is a light environment that I'm not only existing in, but especially what I'm eating in, because that is, again, going to affect whether or not we're going to get things like obesity and metabolic disease.
Mm. It's powerful, isn't it? How nature can have that impact. And that, fascinating about the blood glucose and the blood pressure, because we know shift workers are prone to the dysregulated blood glucose, prediabetes, and cardiovascular and high blood pressure. So I think for our listeners, just hearing that is to really sit and probably rewind and listen to this episode again to what Max is sharing with us. So can you talk us through then, when you were on shift at work, and I know you just briefly talked about it then, for the example of night shift, like when you first started night shift, what did you do? How did you cope, and did you do everything wrong yourself, and what were you seeing other people do? And then how did you best manage that? Because I've been talking for quite a few years about eating minimally during the night when our digestive system is trying to sleep, or at least trying to sleep. Can you maybe share with our listeners some more about the reasons behind that? And I know that you even encourage not eating at all.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And maybe I think I want to make this point now before I forget, which is, if you're on the fence with your work and in terms of the necessity, if at all possible, I would quit or change jobs so that you don't have to work shift work. That is always going to be the number one priority. So just to make that very, very clear, if you have an option at all, especially if you've been doing this for a decade, 2 decades, make a change so that you're working only during the day. So having said that, if this is what happens, this is what you need to do, then again, let's talk about mitigation. Because in my framework for optimal health, and this is something I teach in my course, it's 3 steps. It's maximize natural light signals, minimize the unnatural artificial light signals, and then mitigate. So to start at maximize, that's the changing job. If you can do that, that's going to be maximizing your natural light signals. So if we can't, we're up to minimize and mitigate. So to answer your question, I started doing shift work when I was a junior doctor. Not every rotation. So throughout our junior medical career, we go through surgery, we go through medicine, emergency, and emergency is predominantly the work where you have to work overnight. And I just found that I felt odd. It wasn't pleasant. And kind of transitioning to night shift, it wasn't pleasant at all. I don't remember doing anything too egregiously wrong. It was something that I still seem to manage okay, but it just simply wasn't pleasant. What happened is that over a period of time, when I was working longer shifts, I found ways of mitigating better. So by that stage, I'd already started wearing blue light blocking glasses. And to explain briefly the purpose of blue light blocking glasses, essentially that you look like Bono or some other kind of
rock star,
rock star who's making a fashion statement. But what they are is they're lenses that filter out the blue light. And remember, it's about giving our body the right light signal at the right time. So wearing blue light blocking glasses essentially helps us to prevent sending a daytime blue light signal when it's nighttime. So what I was already wearing them, and then I was doing a long series of shifts and just having a lot of eye strain and just feeling very, very fatigued. So normally we wear blue light glasses when we want to go to sleep. But and that's again to stop us from staying awake. But what I experimented with was wearing them before my shift. And this is something that you can do if they don't put you to sleep and you don't
Yeah.
have a very, very critical alert job. So that's a key point. If you can wear something like blue light blocking glasses and not immediately fall out and into bed, then they can be a helpful tool for reducing eye strain. But what I did is I added them to my repertoire, and I found that my efficiency over a 7-night stretch of night shifts improved. I was sleeping better because I felt less burnt out during the night. But essentially, it started with that. It started with wearing these blue light blockers on shift, and not so darkly tinted, not red, but simply just orange. That was one very
Yep.
important key step. The next step that was incredibly pivotal for me personally, which you mentioned, is about eating. And inherent in this approach was being a very, very low carbohydrate, essentially a carnivore type diet. What that means is that the amount of carbohydrates that I was eating is incredibly low. So when you eat carbohydrates, you get spikes of your insulin hormones, and the way that they are digested. And if you think typically, all food is going to be digested mostly during the day, but the way that our body handles glucose is particularly impacted when we're eating at the wrong time. So what I found was that I'd been a carnivore, and that had helped with my acne. It had helped with general health. And what it had allowed me to do is go for periods of time without eating. And it turned out that not eating during the night shift, so not eating when your body was expecting to be to sleep, was one of the most powerful ways of essentially feeling good, maintaining energy during the shift, and then sleeping soundly the next morning. So
Mm,
it was essentially again a mitigation measure. So
yeah.
being very low carb, and then not eating. So what my day would look like, and this is getting to what has my protocol that seems to work very well for me, is that I would essentially wake up from shift work at about 4 p.m. in the afternoon, go
Yeah.
out immediately um, into the afternoon sun, eat a very, very big meal of essentially just meat and fat. So fatty steaks, lamb chops, sausages, cheese, again depending on things like the metabolic health of who's listening, but essentially steak, burger, like high quality burgers, essentially making red meat the core of that meal, and then going to work on shift and simply just drinking uh, like a mineral water, sparkling mineral water, and having a 20-minute, half an hour break and having a quick nap, but not putting anything in my mouth. And then working shift, being alert, wearing those glasses, coming home and going straight to sleep. So
Yeah.
essentially, what I advocate for is almost a one meal a day type of operation uh, regime, and that seems to prevent us from or mitigate this effect on our blood sugar of eating carbs, especially overnight, and
Mm,
confusing our guts with food at the wrong time.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, and it's good to hear somebody that actually has done it. And obviously there were some challenges to it, and for people to kind of get used to it, because we've also been told we should be having these 3 meals a day with snacks in between, scenario, which is not necessarily the best advice that we could be hearing. So great that you've noticed so much, you're sleeping better, you've got more energy and so forth. What happens when you even after you you finish your night shift and you come home, you're not having anything to eat? So for example, if I'm presuming you're finishing around 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, in the again, it's the times that this has worked most effectively for me. The It's simply about having an empty stomach. So having an empty stomach prior to sleep will allow you to fall asleep quicker,
Mm-hmm.
provided you're not ravenously hungry.
Yeah.
will help you fall asleep quicker and get you into that deep repair. So essentially preserve the quality of sleep. And the reason is because when or during a non-shift work day, it's optimal to finish eating about 4 hours before we go to bed at night.
Mm.
So and again, the reason is because the gut, and just like your other organs, they have their own clocks that sync
Yeah.
up to that master clock in the brain, and they expect nutrients at a particular time of day. So if we eat too close to bedtime, then we're sending a very confusing signal to
Mm.
the body's expecting a red light and we're giving it a green light. So and what it's doing is simply respecting that distance that we need, that time distance between not eating and then sleeping. So some people who might not yet be very metabolically adapted to a low carb or ketogenic diet might find it difficult to go to sleep without eating. In which case, I would still suggest eat a very low carb or zero carb meal
Mm.
if you can. So that might
Yeah.
look like high quality eggs and bacon, or maybe some burger patties. But keep it low carb as well, and maybe give yourself an hour or two before you lie down to again help the digestion process, so the quality of your sleep is preserved. But either that, so 1 meal a day or 2 meals a day, I think is going to be much more preferable than grazing, because the opposite side of the spectrum is eating carbohydrate based foods, drinking Coke, eating carby, potato chips and other kinds of foods overnight, because that energy is going straight into both your subcutaneous fat and your visceral fat, which becomes inside your organs and becomes diabetes. So think very carefully about. There's a couple of different kind of levers to pull, but it's when we're eating, it's what we're eating, and it's essentially the frequency of eating. And on the spectrum of preferable, we have that grazing junk food on one side and 1 meal a day of carnivore. I truly believe that is the best way, after you've adapted to kind of deal with the profound disruption of being on night shift.
Mm. Yeah, great. Yeah, and obviously, that's all going to have an impact on your make us more insulin resistant and leptin resistant, and which is why, unfortunately, I think so many shift workers are, not great for that health, because they haven't been educated to really explain what is actually happening to your body when you eat at this particular time of night or day. So this has been fascinating. Thank you so much, Max. Is there anything I could talk to you for hours, but I know that I know that you want a bit of a time limit here. But is there any little insights or any that you feel like is that I haven't asked question wise that you think that shift workers would? I guess any other hot tips that you could provide for shift workers that would help them to kind of cope? Because we know, a lot of us, I think, would love to quit the jobs, but that's not kind of realistic for what they're doing. And a lot of people do enjoy them, but anything to help would be, great.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to how shift work has become, even more problematic than it historically would have been. And you think, and before everyone moved to LED only lights, people were under incandescent and halogen, and those forms of light actually emit a bit of infrared light. So we can perceive that as heat. So people doing shift work, 40 years ago, even though they were under artificial light, they were at least getting a little bit of infrared. They probably weren't eating the quality of food that has become the norm now, in the terms of rich in sugar, rich in processed seed oils, rich in carbs. So it's and then we've got things like Wi-Fi and non-native electromagnetic fields, which is kind of another whole facet,
Yeah.
another whole point to talk about, which is a separate topic. But these are another source of essentially disruptors to our circadian rhythm and our mitochondrial health, which is very important for circadian health. So, and the onus is kind of even more on everyone now in this day and age to
Mm.
be intentional with our dietary choices and with our light mitigation and minimization as much as we can. The other point I'll make is that so we talked about light, wearing things like blue light blockers if your job permits and if that works with you. We talked about eating schedules and eating content, and I really encourage people to make the effort to become fat adapted, to try a ketogenic or carnivore type diet, because it doesn't happen overnight and you need to put the hard work in to essentially build out the metabolic machinery to run on fat as a fuel. So you'll become
Mm.
ketogenic with usually under 20 grams of carbs a day, or eating predominantly a carnivore based diet. So make that effort to try that as much as possible, because it will enable you to do the 1 meal a day type thing. And if you go straight to that from a standard Australian diet, then you're going to struggle. So I really want to make the point that takes hard work. It takes a month or two. So think about your eye protection. Think about your food and the timing of your food. Think about the use of stimulants, and if you're using coffee a lot, then gradually taper it down. And I truly believe people's caffeine requirements reduce as their carb and sugar intake reduces. So because people are using caffeine to medicate the insulin and blood glucose roller coaster they go on when they eat
Yeah.
and drink source sugar and carbs. So bring down the carbs, bring down the caffeine as much as you can, because that is impacting the quality of the sleep that you get
Yeah.
on shift work and not on shift work. So do that as much as possible, and cover up under artificial light, because although I mentioned to you that the light in the eye is the most important signal for your circadian rhythm, your skin perceives light, and it can also affect your sleep wake cycle by the artificial blue light that is hitting your skin. So if anyone's seen Star Wars, you want to look like the sand person from Tatooine, who's covered in completely. That's what you want to look like under artificial light. And when I worked in the emergency department, I'd have my cardigan on, my scrub cap, my blue blockers, and there would be as least skin exposed, as much skin covered as possible under artificial light. And then the converse, obviously, when you're under natural light, you want the most skin exposed.
Yeah.
So the putting all these pieces together gets you as much as possible to a situation where you can go to sleep. And this is, again, thinking about what can I strive for optimal shift worker health. And
Mm.
to me, that looks like going to sleep easily and without benzodiazepines, without any form
Mm.
of sleeping pill at night, going to sleep, in the morning when your shift finishes, going to sleep easily, sleeping deeply for 7-8 hours, between 6 and 8 hours, consistently and deeply, waking up with an appetite, eating, and then going to work and having energy, being alert, being able to do your job well, and being able to do that for 4 shifts, 5 shifts. If the younger you are, the easier this will be. But that is what you should be aiming for, and not to be reliant on caffeine, stimulant medications or illicit substances. Not feeling so burnt out that you're compromising the quality of work you're delivering. What I'm hope to convey is that it is possible to work effectively and to not kill yourself and to not get diabetes if you put in place all or some, and preferably more of the things that I've recommended. It is possible, but again, we have to be very, very intentional about our food diet, our light diet, and everything that I've talked about. But I really commend you all for doing your work. We need shift workers. We need you to run do these critical jobs overnight. So, as much as possible, look after yourselves with these tips, so that you can preserve your health while you do this important work.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And fascinating about how we've got light receptors on our skin as well. Like, I mean, that's amazing. And yeah, so for the night shifters, I think great tip. I think that's something that no one's probably ever thought about before. So, yeah, well, thank you so much, Max. You've certainly, shared a lot of great information for our listeners, and I love it because you've been there, done that. Like you really do know what it's like and some of the challenges. If anybody wants to get in touch with you and learn more about your work, can you share with us? And I'll put all those details in the show notes for our listeners.
Yeah, so my website, drmaxgulhane.com, has some more information about me and some links to my podcast where I talk a lot about circadian health and light and health. It also has some links of coaching, my private group, which Audra is a part of, where I do a weekly Q&A and answer questions about how to apply these principles to someone's individual environment. And if you still need help after the Q&As and the podcast, and also do a small number of private health consults. And yeah, my podcast can be found on YouTube. It can be found on Spotify and Apple podcasts. And for those in Melbourne, we're hosting an event on the 21st of April, which is going to be drawing together circadian health and light, the effect of light on health, carnivore and low carb diets, as well as regenerative farming, which are essentially the three pillars that I think that we need to focus on as a society if we want to get healthier. So I'll give you that information order for you to share with your audience. But yeah, that's where you can find me, and happy to, if you want to send me an email through my website, or I'm happy to also answer your question there. So yeah.
Brilliant. Excellent. So Melburnians, 21st of April, put that in your diary if you're down there. You get to actually see Max speak. So, yeah, brilliant. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me today, Max. I know your schedule is pretty busy. And thank you, everybody, for being a part of the Healthy Shift Worker podcast today. Please, if you enjoyed the episode, feel free to give it a 5-star rating, and even share the episode with, if you've got some night shifting mates, feel free to share this episode because it enables myself and Max as well through his own podcast to actually reach more people, and with that. So again, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks, Audra. See you later.